ever get stuck talking to someone at, say, a party,
Hmm.
and they're like, yeah, I work in immigration, and you just, I don't know about you, but I immediately picture like a border crossing, someone in a uniform just stamping passports, like all day long.
Yeah, it's the classic image, right? Kind of a stoic, serious look on their
Right,
face.
exactly. But I'm guessing it's got to be more than that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's just a tiny, tiny sliver of what goes on in the world of immigration.
There's a whole world of like policy and strategy happening behind the scenes.
100%.
Which, speaking of, brings us to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
Immigration Policy Officer. We're cracking open RoleCatcher for this one. They're known for these crazy in-depth career guides.
Oh, yeah, they go deep.
So we're using their insights to figure out what this job actually is beyond the passport stamping imagery.
It's way more intellectually demanding, honestly, and way more focused on, actual people.
Right, because you're dealing with real lives here.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So RoleCatcher uses phrases like enhancing efficiency and what was the other one? Integration procedures? Like, it kind of sounds bureaucratic, to be honest.
Yeah, a little bit.
Is it really that dry?
Not even close. Okay, think of it like this. Immigration policy officers, they're like the architects of how a whole country manages the flow of people coming in and out.
Yeah.
And not just at the border, but like the whole picture.
So more like the system as a whole.
Exactly. They're dealing with how to help refugees integrate, how to make asylum seekers feel welcome, how to work with other countries. And of course, they have to stay updated on like every single law that changes, which seems like it happens every week.
Oh, I bet. That sounds like a lot to keep track of. And actually, speaking of laws, there's something in the RoleCatcher guide that kind of surprised me. They mention that these officers need to be familiar with laws in other countries, too, not just their own.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
That just seems like, I don't know, double the work.
It's because immigration is such a global thing now. You can't create good policy just looking at your own country. You have to understand why people are coming to your country, what their home countries are like, what other countries are doing, the whole picture.
So you're not just a legal expert, you have to be a bit of a global diplomat, too.
Pretty much.
I'm starting to understand why it's considered so demanding. Okay, so I'm picturing the work environment now, and I have to admit, I'm imagining like a stuffy office, piles of legal papers everywhere.
Well,
Is it all like meetings and paperwork?
there's definitely a lot of that, especially with how fast everything moves these days. But it's also about real stories, Like, imagine you're deep in the data on refugee resettlement, surrounded by, like you said, stacks of reports.
Mm.
And then a new case file lands on your desk. Yeah. A family fleeing a war zone. Their story is heartbreaking, but hopeful, all at the same time.
So it's not just numbers on a page, it's actual families, individuals.
Exactly. Those statistics suddenly have faces.
That must be incredibly heavy knowing you're dealing with the real-life impact of these policies.
Yeah, it can be. RoleCatcher actually talks about that, the potential for stress in this job. They don't sugarcoat it, which I appreciate.
That's good. I always say honesty is the best policy.
Right.
Because, yeah, you're potentially shaping how a whole nation welcomes newcomers. That's a big deal.
It is. It requires a lot of resilience, but also, like, a really specific type of empathy. You have to connect with people from all over the world while also understanding the legal stuff, the policies. It's a balance.
Definitely not your typical 9 to 5. Now, RoleCatcher mentions that this whole blend of like human interaction, policy, and even data analysis is all supported by technology, too. What role does tech play in all of this?
Well, think about it. Immigration creates tons of data, right? Visa applications, how many people are coming in, what happens to them after they arrive. Policy officers have to be able to understand all that data. They use special software to find patterns, to predict how many people might come in next year, things like that.
So they're using data to try and get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, exactly. It's about making smart decisions, not just guessing. Like, let's say they look at the data and see that a certain group of refugees is having a really hard time finding jobs.
Okay.
That might mean there's something wrong with the job training program, and they
Yeah.
need to change it.
Wow. So you're taking this huge amount of information and you're using it to tell a story, a human story, and then using that story to try and improve the system.
It's all connected. Data, policy, and real people.
It's actually pretty fascinating when you get into it.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the big picture, but RoleCatcher does a good job of also getting into the nitty-gritty, the pros and cons of the job itself.
Yeah, they do.
Because let's be real, no job is perfect.
Right. Every job has its ups and downs. Let's dive into that next because I think it's one thing to understand what the job is on paper, but it's another to really understand what it's like to actually do it every day. What are some of the challenges and rewards that RoleCatcher highlights? So it sounds like a pretty emotionally demanding job.
Oh, for sure. RoleCatcher's pretty upfront about that. They mention, like dealing with tough situations, potential for burnout, all that stuff.
Yeah, because you're dealing with people in really vulnerable positions.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
not for everyone, that's for sure. But they also highlight the rewards, which, let me tell you, they can be huge.
Yeah, like what? Give us the good stuff.
Well, imagine, you help create a policy that helps reunite families that were separated by war. Or you figure out a way to, like, fast-track work visas for doctors and nurses who are desperately needed somewhere. That's real impact.
Wow, that's incredible. It's literally changing people's lives.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, but let's be real. You're dealing with international agreements, domestic laws, constantly changing political situations. It, it sounds like it takes a certain kind of person to not just survive, but thrive in that world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need, like, a really good grasp of the law, for starters. Like, even just understanding the difference between refugee status and asylum, it's complicated.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. It seems like those terms get used interchangeably sometimes, but I'm guessing they're not actually the same thing at all.
No, two different things. There's a whole international agreement, the Refugee Convention from, like, way back in 1951, that defines a refugee as someone who can't go back to their home country because they're afraid of being persecuted for, like, their religion or their political views. Asylum, on the other
I
hand,
think it's tricky, I bet.
a little. It's more about a country deciding to protect someone who's already on their soil, even if they haven't gone through the whole refugee process.
So there are all these legal nuances you have to be on top of.
Oh, yeah. And it's not just the legal stuff. Let's say you're working on resettling refugees from, I don't know, a country that's in the middle of a civil war,
Yeah.
right? You have to understand what's happening in that war, which countries are involved, what their policies are, and how many refugees each country can realistically take in. It's a lot.
It's like you're a lawyer, a diplomat, and a global news analyst all at the same time.
It's a lot to juggle.
So it sounds like a pretty demanding job, to say the least.
Definitely not for the faint of heart.
Now, RoleCatcher mentions, obviously, having the right education is important, but they seem to stress that certain skills are just as crucial as any degree. What are we talking about here?
Well, they mention things like reading comprehension, which, might seem obvious, but
When you're wading through pages and pages of legal documents.
exactly. You have to be able to absorb that information quickly, figure out what's important, and then actually remember when you need it.
Makes sense. What else?
Active listening is another big one. Imagine you're interviewing a family seeking asylum. You have to really listen to their story, understand their experiences, but also, like, pick out those key details that might actually help their case.
Right, because even small details can make a big difference in these situations.
Absolutely. It's about being both empathetic and analytical at the same time. And of course, you need really strong communication skills. You're dealing with people from all different backgrounds, cultures, languages. You have to be able to build trust and communicate clearly no matter what.
So it's about bridging those gaps.
100%. And then there's critical thinking. RoleCatcher calls it out as essential, and I couldn't agree more.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, let's say you're looking at immigration data from a bunch of different countries, and you notice a sudden spike in asylum applications from one specific region.
Okay.
Critical thinking helps you connect the dots. Maybe there was a natural disaster or a political coup or something else going on that's causing people to flee.
You're basically a detective trying to piece together the bigger picture.
And once you understand what's driving those numbers, you can start to come up with solutions, Allocate resources where they're needed, maybe adjust policies, things like that.
So you're not just reacting to problems, you're trying to anticipate them.
Exactly. That's what makes this job so interesting and so important. You're not just pushing paper, you're actually trying to make the world a little bit better, a little bit safer for people who need it most.
That's a powerful way to think about it. Okay, so we've talked about the skills, the challenges, the rewards, but what about the actual career path?
Right, like where do you go from here?
Exactly. RoleCatcher breaks it down into 3 main stages, starting with the entry-level position. What does that look like?
So at the entry level, you're basically learning the ropes. Imagine yourself, assisting the more senior officers, doing a lot of research, maybe attending some meetings to see how things work.
So a lot of observations, soaking up knowledge.
Exactly. It's about mastering the basics of immigration law, understanding the different policies, and proving that you can handle the workload.
What kind of tasks might a new officer be doing, just to give people an idea?
Oh, let's see. You might be asked to draft parts of a report or to look over visa applications to make sure everything's in order. Or maybe you'd be tasked with researching conditions in a specific country to see if someone's asylum claim is legit.
So it's a mix of research analysis and a bit of detective work, too.
You got it. And as you gain more experience, you move up to a junior officer role.
Okay, so what changes at that level?
Well, you're given a lot more responsibility. Instead of just assisting, you might be leading your own research projects, contributing to policy recommendations, maybe even representing your organization at external meetings.
So you're not just following directions anymore, you're actually starting to shape things.
Exactly. It's about finding your voice within the field, advocating for the changes you think are important.
That sounds really exciting.
It is. And then, of course, there's the senior level, which is where things get really interesting.
Okay, for those who have big ambitions, paint us a picture. What does it mean to be a senior immigration policy officer?
At that level, you're basically a rock star in the field. You're advising high-level government officials, you're leading international delegations, you're giving talks and writing articles that everyone reads. You're a thought leader, shaping the conversation on immigration on a global scale.
Wow, that's next level stuff.
Right. And it comes with a lot of responsibility, of course.
Hmm.
You're often dealing with really sensitive political situations, trying to find common ground between groups that might disagree on everything. It's high stakes, for sure.
But also incredibly impactful.
Absolutely. If you want to make a real difference in the world, this is the kind of career where you can do it.
So we've talked about the human side of this job, the skills, the career path. But RoleCatcher also mentioned something that could completely change everything we've talked about so far. Technology. Specifically, artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How will AI change the world of immigration?
It's a question a lot of people are asking these days. We're seeing AI pop up everywhere, automating tasks, analyzing data at incredible speeds.
And it's already starting to impact immigration, too.
Really? How so? I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine how it would work.
Well, think about the visa application process, right?
Say? Yeah.
Mountains of paperwork, tons of forms, everything takes forever. AI could potentially streamline all of that.
Really? Like how?
Well, imagine an AI system that can analyze all those documents instantly, check for errors, flag anything suspicious, you know.
So it's like having a super efficient assistant.
Exactly. And that frees up the human officers to focus on the more complex stuff, the things AI can't do.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like actually sitting down with applicants, having real conversations, using their judgment and experience to assess those human factors that an algorithm can't always understand.
Because sometimes a person's story doesn't always fit neatly into a box that an algorithm can understand.
Exactly.
Like that. It's not about replacing humans. It's about giving them better tools to do their jobs and to do them more humanely.
That's the ideal, isn't it?
It really is. And I've heard people say that AI could actually help reduce bias in the system. Is that true?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, think about it. If you design the algorithms correctly, they're supposed to be objective, right? They don't see color, religion, any of that. So theoretically, they could help ensure that everyone is treated equally based on the facts of their case.
No, that would be incredible. But I also know that AI is only as good as the data it's trained on.
Exactly. That's the big
Exactly. So if the data itself is biased, the AI is just going to amplify that bias.
100%. And that's where RoleCatcher is right to be cautious. They don't go into a ton of detail about the potential downsides, but they do mention that there are ethical implications here that need to be addressed.
Which is huge. We can't just hand over these life-changing decisions to machines without, really thinking through the consequences.
Absolutely not. We need to make sure these AI systems are transparent, accountable, and most importantly, that they're designed with human oversight, with ethics at the forefront.
It's about remembering that behind every data point, there's a real person with hopes and dreams and a life story that deserves to be heard.
Well said.
So it sounds like the future of this whole field could get really interesting really fast.
It definitely could.
Now, for our listeners who are completely hooked on this career path, where should they go to learn more? I know RoleCatcher is a good starting point, but what else?
Yeah, RoleCatcher is great. Their website has a ton of info, like detailed breakdowns of different immigration careers, salary ranges, all of that.
They even have that tool where you can upload your resume and it tells you what jobs you'd be a good fit for, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
It's super helpful, especially if you're just starting out.
It's like having a personalized career counselor, but Way cheaper.
And if you really want to go all in, they have their premium service, RoleCatcher Copilot AI. It's pretty cool, actually.
I've heard of that. What is it exactly?
It's basically like having an AI career coach in your pocket. It helps you, like, tailor your resume for specific jobs. It gives you feedback on your cover letter, even helps you practice your interviewing skills.
So it's using the power of AI to help people navigate that whole often terrifying job search process.
Exactly. Makes it way less stressful.
Love it. We'll be sure to link to all of that in our show notes so you can check it out. But for now, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of an immigration policy officer, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I think the big takeaway here is that this is a career that's both incredibly demanding, but also incredibly rewarding. You're using your brain, you're using your heart, you're working with people from all over the world, and you have the potential to make a real, tangible difference in people's lives.
It's about being a problem solver, a bridge builder, and maybe even a little bit of a visionary, right?
100%.
Oh,
It's about shaping a better future for everyone.
beautifully said. If this deep dive has piqued your interest and you're eager to learn more, head over to RoleCatcher's website. All the details will be in our show notes. And hey, if you end up on the front lines of immigration policy shaping the future we've been talking about, we want to hear from you. Until then, keep those minds curious, those hearts open, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.